Hi guys, how's it going? Rhetorical question, of course. I am back with another review of Netflix's miniseries Unbelievable, and I'm on to episode 4 now, so halfway through. So this is really exciting stuff, guys, because I'm absolutely loving this. I'm just so hooked on it, and it literally gets better episode by episode as things unfold with the case, but also just things developing and new stuff happening with the characters as well, which I'm really digging. It's very character driven, which a lot of the best dramas are, a lot of the best TV. So yeah, that's why I decided to do one of these now instead of Euphoria, which I would normally do about this time. And it's been I'll just give some context. It's been a bit of a manic day with me, just watching a lot of stuff, a lot of TV. Also been watching a very intriguing BBC crime thriller called Capture, which is on a Tuesday. So that's been pretty good as well. Pretty exciting, intriguing mystery behind that as well, slowly unfolding. So that's one I'd recommend checking out. And it's even got a Ron Perlman cameo, Hellboy himself, who's good fun in it. And I've been to the cinema today, saw Hustlers, which I might do a video of in the next few days. And I will say I'm going to get to Euphoria tomorrow if you keep up with those reviews. So I'll record it in the morning and I'll get it up tomorrow at some point. But actually, just to say I've just watched Euphoria this week's, and it is pretty meaty. I have to say it's an intriguing episode, so I should have quite a bit to say on that when I do the review tomorrow. But anyway, I thought I'd continue with Unbelievable since things have been going so well, and there's been some good responses to these videos. So again, I probably made more notes than I normally do. A lot of back and forth. There's a lot of development in the case, but also on Marie's side, actually quite a lot happening with her. That's quite significant in this episode, so they're slowly bringing the two together. So I'll get to Marie in a moment or two, but I'll start with the case stuff really, because there's a lot of that, and I did make a lot of notes, so as I said, I'll try not to consult them too much. And it's probably best if I go through it, quite in order sort of thing mostly, and do a summary. But anyway, the episode opens with Grace and Karen question the latest victim, or the latest one they've discovered, and that is the elderly woman Dorothy, who actually runs like a frat house essentially for boys. So again, the show is making these interesting connections to do with boys and kind of the gender gap, but kind of these striking points about how boys or men in general behave around women of a certain thing. There's the fact that this elderly woman, she's almost vulnerable in being put in these situations, and can you trust guys around such a vulnerable person? At one point she discusses about how it can be, quite disgusting because there's smells and they can be quite noisy. But then they do actually treat her a lot like a mother almost. She doesn't exactly say that, but that's one of the things she sort of hints at. And she says, since the attack, one of them actually walks me to my car at night, which Karen comments is nice. But yeah, it's sort of, I think because there's this whole thing about kind of men and how sinister they are sometimes, and how, sexualized women become, and kind of this idea of trust between them. The fact that this woman runs a sorority, oh, well, I said the wrong word, but runs a frat house, sorry, is, and she's elderly, obviously, around all these young guys. I think is sort of quite intriguing to sort of say. And again, it's a really powerful scene when it needs to be, because it does a good job of kind of showing the trauma of going through such an attack, but also then having to go over it again with cops, it's almost like reliving the experience, because as Grace and Karen are asking her questions, we get flashes of her perspective, her memories of the attack at the crime, and it's kind of effective, because it again highlights, and these crimes are linked, these rapes are by the same perpetrator, because of the flashbacks being consistent, or the memories being consistent. But it's also, it gets across the fact that these horrible memories are being brought back for Dorothy, the name of this victim is. And at one point Karen asks, is there any unusual things or anything worth noting then you didn't tell them originally? She's just being quite gentle about prodding her, just in case there's anything she felt she couldn't tell the police at the time, or for some reason left out. And all she says really, which is of note, is just he was very gentle, and mentions about obviously cleaning the crime scene. And she, Karen reassures her, says no, that's good, that's not good, but that's something which one of the other victims said as well. And Dorothy says this whole thing about, he was really fighting with himself, over whether to do it, wrestling with that. And Grace is, it's a funny comment, but it's meant to comment her when Grace says, I'm surprised you can even carry on a conversation at some point. And when you just say the line in isolation, it sounds a bit like blunt or rude, but it's actually meant to comfort her. It's actually saying, the fact that you're so well put together, so composed, is really impressive, because Dorothy is, in this scene, she's really strong, and she's, not exactly upbeat about it, but, she's very much life goes on. But it's very interesting how she would be so well adjusted about it, and so not bitter about the whole experience. And I think again that maybe, I don't know, it goes back to her being an older victim, her maybe having perspective, just the way she views the world maybe. But it's an interesting scene. I think it was interesting to show this different type of character, this different type of victim, and because of her age being much older than the other ones we've seen so far anyway, then I think that was a good sort of contrast to see. And in the next sort of scene, Grace and Karen, they go to the FBI, essentially. They talk to this guy, Taggart, I think his last name is, and I couldn't help but thinking of the the Beverly Hills Cop character. My mind immediately raced to that, which is, quite significant. But Whenever I hear that name, I just think of Taggart out of Beverly Hills Cop, to be fair. And they start going over with him about things, and to be fair to the guy, he is honest. I mean, he's honest when they asked him about, normally murder cases are taken a lot more seriously. Rapes aren't taken so seriously, aren't they? And he's honest about that. And then says, yeah, so he is upfront about that. He doesn't try to hide, even though he's confessing this big fault in the system. And they mentioned the DNA evidence from the bedroom with, I think it was Karen's case, and obviously the lag in getting that evidence back, which is important for them. So Taggart says, yeah, it's fine. We can have that ready for you in like 24 hours. So that's obviously that sort of justifies really Grace saying, you'll work with me here because better facilities when we've got access to the FBI and that sort of stuff. And this is a standout scene actually, because when they're just, when he confesses about, the sort of the rape cases statistic or not being taken as seriously. And this is where you can really see the chemistry between Grace and Karen. But Grace is, first of all, says, we've been down this alley before, or avenue, and then Karen instantly replies, we live on this avenue, or I live on this avenue, whichever way around it was. But yeah, it's just this brilliant line. It's this smart bit of banter between them. As I said, the chemistry is really there, and I think it's just this they're starting to click, and they're starting to have this more relaxed relationship, and I think it's just also this special little kind of attitude from like in a good way, this very distinct sort of personality, this very in your face sort of confident, sort of vibe coming from them. So it's really well written dialogue, really well delivered. I mean, I absolutely love the way it just flows, and it's a really really good scene. And the other big thing about the scene, as I'm just looking at my notes, because the guy goes through some of his theories about the case, because it's Grace has obviously suggests about the I think she mentions about the possibility of it being an ex-police officer or a current one at this point. Oh, I think she actually mentions the whole issue, the whole theory about him knowing about cottoning onto the loopholes, and about the guy, about if he goes from state to state, only commits one offence in each state, he's less likely to get caught, because they're unlikely to have dialogue between states. But the guy, and he goes through these sort of three theories, but then they sort of walk out later, and they've agreed, he's going to work with them and try to help them on the case. But yeah, because it's then when Karen asks Grace, why didn't you mention the cop theory with him? And Grace's response is something like, "Oh yeah, sure." Then he's gonna hone in on that sort of thing, and it's almost like this distrust, which we see become a factor I think it's the next episode. Actually, it could be this one. I'll see in a minute. I'm pretty sure it's the next one, but you can see this distrust between Grace and Taggart, and just the fact, yeah, she's maybe a bit suspicious of, male police officers in general, perhaps. So Karen, this is maybe the other big thing with the investigation, or certainly a big sort of character thing. So Karen gets a response from a guy, like a student, who saw a flyer. So she left a flyer, just asking if anyone with any information would come forward. And so this guy comes in and says, he suspects a guy, someone he knows, this guy called Scott. He thinks he might have done it because he fits some of the ammo sort of thing. And he says, because he knows for a fact that Scott forces girls to have sex with him. And he says, then he's seen Scott, get girls so drunk then they have sex with him, or one night at a party he got a girl so drunk and then started taking her up to his room. And it's actually good how thorough Karen is, because she asks him, how do you know that's what he was doing? And it's this interesting thing, because you might just think, well, Karen, very trusting or very willing, obviously because of what we've seen before with her, maybe would just be like, oh, okay, and trusting this is true, she could imagine. But yeah, it just shows what a good detective she is, and she does question everything, or wants to make sure every little thing adds up. And I think it might go back to her being, just wanting to make sure and being sort of suspicious, and yeah, not being too trusting until things actually pan out and things come together. But anyway, he says, it was sort of obvious. He knows the pattern, and he says he didn't want to follow him up because it's, he's sorry, I keep saying that. Then he that he knows the guy, basically. He's seen the pattern. Yeah, he didn't want to follow him up because he didn't want to sort of sit through that. But it's a really well shot scene, as in is the next scene when Karen questions Scott. But we see this other guy, like sweaty palm sort of thing. He's really nervous about, because he knows Scott, obviously, and he doesn't want the information getting back to him that he kind of ratted him out. And sweaty palms, as I said, so it's really. So in the next scene, Karen calls Scott in, basically, and there's this whole thing about the previous investigation. So we hear then the case was dropped, but then Scott was actually arrested, but then the case was dropped because the girl didn't want to file charges, and maybe the evidence wasn't quite concrete. But so again, this brings up questions about the quality of the policing and the detective work, and just how thorough things were or weren't in this case. But again, why did she drop it, sort of thing has to be asked. And this once again plays into the whole part of the gender thing, really, with because Scott, she questions Scott, and and at this point we don't know whether he's innocent or guilty. which is an interesting point actually, which I'll get to in a moment. But the point is, we at this stage we don't know if he raped the girl or not. But the fact of the matter is, a bit like, the guy then Grace interviewed in the previous, or one of the it was the previous episode. Scott in this scene just comes in with this brass, cocky attitude. He comes off as this real spoiled sort of rich kid who is, just really cocky and just very condescending the way he talks to Karen. And again, a bit like the guy in the previous episode with Grace, he just has this attitude, and why are you wasting my time with this? His comments are very casual, very sexist, really, and he kind of goes into this sort of spiel really about victim culture and what have you, and the fact that he claims, the girl was looking for like status sort of thing, and claiming to be a victim. He comes up with this idea that because he didn't want a relationship with her, then that upset her. She got uptight, and that's when she decided to come up with the rape story. And so it's this whole sort of thing. He's very arrogant, very sort of, as I said, demeaning, has this really negative attitude about being questioned, regardless of whether he's innocent or guilty. And the point to make here is that even if he was innocent of this particular crime, it does sound likely that he has been guilty of this in the past, because certainly if you believe what his friend was telling Karen, then it's implied then this guy has a history of doing this, so he's kind of done it a number of times. So it's sort of this interesting thing where, he may be innocent of this particular crime, but there is this pattern there. Chances are he has done it at some point. And another interesting point that then Karen uses against him, sort of fires back, is then, because he immediately says that, oh, okay, I was cleared of those charges before, I'm glad you guys, sort of dropped them. But she immediately corrects him and says, well, no, you weren't proven innocent so much as the victim just dropped the charges, so she's pointing out the difference. And I think what's really great about these sorts of scenes and what the show is doing with the two lead characters, Karen and Grace, is that it's showing the culture where they have to wrestle back power from the men, from the whole culture. Then they almost have to put them in their place. They have to really step up and go above and beyond, and they have to do these extra things to kind of keep their power, to kind of match them and keep in control of the situation, because of the way things are, because of how out of kilter things are, and the challenges that women face in the workplace as cops and various things, the sort of attitudes they have to come up against. And that's a striking thing, because it's making points about the police force and about the possibility that this could be a cop. And yeah, just within the police force, the unbalance. So it's kind of showing then there's, discrimination and unbalance everywhere, or certainly in most professions. So that's why scenes of like these are really important. And it's a brilliant scene. The direction again is just so good and really gripping, really engaging. The back and forth between them, it's almost like a power struggle, but it's shot like a big, sort of face off almost, with Karen kind of, you know, very icy, very focused, or sort of staring daggers at him, and kind of really coming back strongly. She really outsmarts him, essentially. She turns things around. She kind of gives him enough rope to sort of hang himself, and then just comes back with, she uses what he says against them. It's a really brilliant scene. And as it turns out, he is innocent, because she asks him to roll up his trouser leg, because she wants to see if the tattoos match it, the birthmark, sorry. And that's another thing, actually, because they find out about, they're sort of comparing cases, and there's this sort of birthmark which they know about, and the guy has a different birthmark. It's not the same birthmark. And I know when she's talking to Amber, which I think is before this, I'm pretty sure it is, she shows Amber a picture of Scott, and this is after the conversation with the other guy, and Amber doesn't recognise it particularly, although she sort of may not. And then I guess it's confirmed in this scene, because it's not the same birthmark. So it's inconsistent. It doesn't quite add up. So it's this again. It's this sort of power struggle. It's this back and forth, because then Karen looks surprised, because I think she's obviously expecting it to be the case, and this is the guy. So then he doesn't know why she looks puzzled necessarily, but he comes back with this again really smug line. He says, my dad's, whatever he says, my dad's going to freak over this. He almost sued you the last time, but yeah, now he's going to freak out. So he's again being very cocky, threatening to sue the detective, but she immediately, oh yeah, that's before, but then she gets him to do the thing, and he makes a cocky remark about, yeah, that's one badass birthmark or something. And then Karen actually takes a photo, which really throws him off, and he's like, hey lady, you can't do that. And she sort of tells a white lie. She says, I don't need your permission, and kind of tells him to get out or whatever, and walks away. And it's just this brilliant irony sort of thing, because she knows it's not the right person, but she's going to let him sweat anyway. She's not going to tell her that, and by doing the photo thing, it freaks him out, taking the picture. So it's again this great like reversal of power, where she has put this jerk in his place, even though he turns out not to be the guy, which is obviously disappointing for them. But yeah, also another thing I'll just say about the Amber scene, when Karen's talking to her, is then she says she's dumped the boyfriend, and says he was getting too intense, things not moving on, not working out, so he's left. So I mean, I'll be honest, inside I kind of, sort of did a fist pump because, as I said last time, yeah, I really didn't like him. So good riddance, I have to say. Good choice, Amber. So that's that. So Scott turned out not to be the guy. But there's various things. There's various, the people that Karen and Grace are working with, the researchers are asking around and comparing different things. And so they do get another lead, and the lead is this case with this girl Lily, who was attacked. It was an attempted rape, but she actually managed to escape, so it didn't quite happen. But as a result, because she basically escaped and sort of jumped through a window, so she received bad injuries. So she's in the hospital now. But that's kind of, they've got a link when they hear about this. So Karen and Grace go over there to question her. So yeah, I don't want to get muddled up here, but basically they go over there and she's still in the hospital, and her mother is just choose them one. She's just so mad. So basically the mother is, from the start, she's really sarcastic about the previous detective because she points out he didn't take it seriously. He said, Lily pointed out to him the fact that, this could be a cop or something, or, this guy could be something like that anyway. So she basically painted this picture that they were not taken seriously at all when the case were dropped and all this. So really upset. So Karen in particular, really sympathetic, tries to calm her down because obviously they want information from her daughter, or at least, yeah, but it's tough to get access because she says she's still in the hospital, and the mother's obviously really hostile at this point. She has no trust in the police, in the detectives, which, you can understand. But obviously, from our point of view, we know Karen and Grace. We know they're good detectives. We know that they are sincere and that they want to catch this guy. They're serious about the case. But from the point of view of the mother, you can understand why she may not be convinced about this. So she kind of almost shuts the door on the conversation, literally, where she's saying she's in the hospital and you'll have to wait till she comes out. And she mentions that she's sort of religious, basically. So she brings up the whole religion side and kind of says then she'll just, when she uses some phrase which I sort of forget, but to do with then she'll be released when kind of, and it's not exactly God, but whatever she says, when they say when she's ready, sort of. But she brings up the religion angle anyway, so the fact that she's very much guided by religion. So she's kind of shutting down the conversation and saying that she doesn't want her daughter talking with them. But then Karen, gently reassures her. He says, or she says, sorry, I don't want to get in the way of Lily and her religion, but could you please give her my card? Could you, once she's home, could you please tell her to give me a call, please? And the mother takes the card. So it shows, Karen's alternative methods, how she's very good at being sensitive and subtle, which you need to be, as a police officer, a detective in this case. You need different methods of dealing with different people. If they don't trust you, you need to find a way to make them trust you. So that sort of bridges that gap. So yeah, it's another nice little sign of how skilled Karen is, her people skills, which in theory is a very important part of detective work. Another interesting side of things is that Grace asks her husband, who of course works in the force, she asks him if he can pull records like personnel files on different cops, because again, this is following the rationale that a policeman did it, which they're thinking is starting to look more and more likely. And they've done this thing earlier when they've narrowed, I've skipped over some stuff, but where they narrowed certain stuff down, and they narrowed it down to the likely candidate amongst police officer or ex-police. And it's funny because they narrow it down to this one guy, but then said, he was in prison when these offences took place, so it can't be him. But anyway, Grace asks her husband to pull if he could give her access on these personnel files. And he, I guess not surprisingly, says, no, this is illegal. I can't make an exception for my wife. And it's something they come back to, actually, because I've seen the next episode. But Grace, you can tell, is a bit put out with him. But it's understandable, his thing. But anyway, we're going to come back to that. And I'll get to Marie in a moment because there's some significant stuff. But a lot of, things really building with the case in this episode. Now, the actual end of the episode is that Marie's on the phone with Karen. Grace. Karen's on the phone with Grace is the way to say it. And she sort of hangs up on her suddenly because she sees a truck in front of her. So she's just driving in her car, and she sees a truck in front of her, and it's pretty much the same sort of truck as in the previous episode, the truck she saw on the video footage, which she suspects belongs to the guy, the criminal. So she immediately sort of pursues it and pulls it over, asks him to stop and that, and when she comes around to the driver's side, she sees it's like this elderly black guy who's with his I can't remember whether it was either his daughter or his son. I think it was a girl, I think it was a daughter, but anyway, with his kid. And so that's kind of that. She obviously realises it's not him, and she just says she's about to come up with some excuse, about to mention that he was speeding, I think, or something, but then realises what the hell, there's no point, and she says never mind and leaves. And that's actually how the episode ends. But that's just it's those small scenes like that, because they just do add so much. They add so much in the state of mind and the characters, because I think, as I said, a big part of what's engrossing me and making this such a satisfying drama is the characters and what they go through, and they're in. I think, again, all great drama, particularly on TV, comes through that. And I think if this was just about the nuts and the bolts of the case, not that that's not good and interesting, it certainly is, and the direction of, as I said, has been really good, but if it was just about the case and what have you, I don't think it would be as good as it is. I think it is these little character moments and what it's saying about them and their worldview or their approach to detective work. And, in this case, it's just a little scene to show how alert, how focused Karen is on the case. The fact that she suddenly sees this truck and she's immediately onto it and isn't afraid to, sort of pull it over. But, yeah, really good end to the episode, because also it's a bit of a suspense moment where you think she might be onto something, but it doesn't quite pan out. So the case really cooking, lots of details. I'm sure I've forgotten some, but I'll just talk a bit about Marie, because again there's some significant development on her side in this episode. So in the previous episode, she got the citation, basically saying that they're trying to charge, or she's could be charged at least for false reporting, to do with falsely reporting the rape as they perceive it. So in this, she shows up to, I think it's the courthouse, and she's actually told, you missed a court date yesterday, so you're in trouble, basically, And Marie's like, well, I didn't get a notice about it, what's going on? So it's like the clerk at the court place, and she actually reveals then the court hearing notice was sent to the wrong address. It was sent to, I can't remember whether it was just the wrong address, or I think it was the address she was previously at. So you've got this irony where the court hearing notice was sent to her old address, so to the wrong address, but the citation was actually sent to the right address, the one she's currently. I mean, it's probably a bit far-fetched to believe, but it could happen. I guess it's credible enough, but it's just this sort of dig at the system, this critique of the system, and this sort of irony, and I think it again just stacks things up, because at this point Marie is really going through it, really just everything seems to be stacking up against her at this point. But again, this is great sort of character work, because even this clerk in the court house is this great little character who's really sympathetic and supportive of Marie. She's not just cold and heartless and saying, well, what can we do, it's your own fault, and that sort of thing. She never has an attitude. She's sympathetic because they sent it to the wrong address, so it's not Marie's fault. And she has a great line about they don't communicate, basically, because she says how it's two different departments and they don't communicate. And I love the fact that she calls out their bullshit sort of thing. And, it's a big part of what the show is saying, the series is saying. And so again, it's this supportive thing where she actually chases up one of the attorneys, because Marie needs to see someone. She needs to get her case heard as soon as possible. So, and again, there's this thing with the attorney where he's saying, "Oh, I've got all these cases. I don't want to take it." But the clerk talks him around, so he takes on Marie's case. And there's some interesting stuff, because I sort of thought Marie was going to go through like all this stuff in court in this episode, but what happens is she's told to plead not guilty to the false reporting, and the reason she's told to plead not guilty is because the attorney sort of reasons by saying, if you plead guilty, you'll go straight to jail. Now you'll be locked up, basically, for well, I don't know how long, but a while anyway. Then she would get put away. Whereas if you plead not guilty, by the time this goes to trial, we can try and talk to the judge. We can try and kind of work out a deal with her, a plea bargain sort of thing. So there's more of a chance of getting a reduced sentence. Is this logic? And it's a sound logic, kind of. You think, okay, as a strategy that works quite well, and I think also it works out quite well dramatically, because we know Marie is she originally was telling the truth about the rape, so it sort of works out dramatically, because the way things are panning out, it's going to get to the stage where you would hope that Marie, then it's proven then she was telling the truth about the rape, essentially. But things move forward. She obviously pleads not guilty, and they're waiting for a hearing. And then later on, she's at her foster parents, the previous ones, the couple, and they see a report on TV, on the news, and the report is to do with another victim. And they describe the nature of the crime, the nature of the rape, and they obviously see this, and the foster mum immediately is caught up in it, because she remembers how Marie described it, and it's obviously the same pattern, it's the same description as is being described on this news report. So they're obviously really stunned, because they're in this kind of, that they were in this place where they pretty much assumed that she was making it up, or certainly they'd moved on. So to suddenly see this, so she's really stunned. I mean, I think she was convinced, just because she was the one in the first episode who was suspicious, because Marie wasn't acting how she acted when it happened to her, or how you would expect someone to act. I don't know about the husband. He might have had other ideas than Marie had really been raped. But anyway, this obviously sets her mind racing. And she says, Marie, this is the same way you describe it. Are you telling me then you really were raped? You know, she brings up the question. And Marie tries to shut it down. She gets very frantic, and, you know, it's sort of, I mean, she's still in denial, or she still denies it to them, although she does kind of say, you know, then she didn't want all this stuff coming out, she didn't want to complicate things, and she basically just shuts it down completely, gets really defensive, and I think in a roundabout sort of way sort of admits it, but kind of says, there's nothing, it didn't happen, but she like repeats what they say to her and says it didn't happen, and sort of storms out. So in a way it sounds like she is saying that it happened in a roundabout sort of way. But yeah, it's a big scene and it's going to drive on the next episode, going to move on. So some interesting developments on Marie's side. So it's balancing a lot with the case and with Marie, and very interesting, very intriguing again, and impressive, because I said just how outstanding the first episode was, and then it kept my interest with the next two, but I sort of said in the previous video then maybe it didn't quite match the first one, but this one was just great. I think it was probably the best episode, yeah, and whether I feel the same about episode 5, you'll have to wait till tomorrow, but things are really, or the day after, I'll try and get it out as soon as possible, but things really cooking along, and this halfway through now, but this is shaping up to be one of the highlights of the year. It's really great stuff, really quite different, I think, from how these kind of true to life crime investigation plots are normally down. So really loving it. So I should be back soon. I'll just flag a few things up. You can find me on Twitter if you just search for @KeithBeard on Twitter. You can find me on there, and you can maybe just comment on my reviews. You can even ask me a question if you want. I check it pretty regularly, so I can get back to you or mention you in one of these videos. You can also maybe spread the love a bit, just spread my channel about the link on Twitter if you have friends you think might be interested. That would be a good way to promote the channel. I would appreciate that. You can also find me on Letterboxd, which is, my name is Bookhouseboy80. That's Bookhouseboy80, as in a Twin Peaks reference. So you can find me on Letterboxd with my movie ratings and my list of movies and stuff like that. And also, just another thing to plug, the Cinema Professor, my page on Facebook, which is where I promote my weekly film show on Beyond Radio, which happens every Thursday at 8 o'clock. You can listen live on the Beyond Radio website if you're interested in that sort of thing. I'm discussing Back to the Future at the moment, about the making of those films, because I'm doing sci-fi, so that's Back to the Future is what I'm focusing on at the moment. I also do new film reviews, and I guess if you happen to live in the local area or nearby, listings, and I play some pretty great tunes if I don't say so myself. So that's another thing to mention. You can find the Cinema Professor page on Facebook if you so wish. And not too long to Halloween and to the month of October, and I will be watching horror movies all throughout that month and posting reviews on YouTube. Also a few special live streams which I'll mention in the coming days. I'll sort of flag them up for you. But anyway, I've rambled about enough. I've promoted enough stuff. So thank you for listening to this review, and I'll be back with more soon. Goodbye.